Welcome to the Smart Weight Loss Coaching Podcast. I'm Dr. Lisa Oldson, a board-certified weight loss medicine specialist and certified life coach. In this podcast, I'll share fresh insights and effective techniques for incorporating mindset, habit change, and proven science into your life. Are you ready to achieve sustainable weight loss, wellness, and longevity? Then let's jump in and lose weight the smart way. Welcome back. I'd like to start today's episode with a confession. When I first got into this field, like most doctors, I told my patients to exercise more, especially if they wanted to lose weight. I was doing it too. I did it because I was working from the same cultural script that most of us grew up with. Eat less, move more, and the weight will come off. Simple math, right? Except it's not simple. And the math doesn't work the way we were taught. Today's episode is about exercise, what it actually does, what it doesn't do, and how to use that knowledge to build a relationship with movement that actually sticks. We're also going to talk about the psychology and neuroscience of habit formation, because understanding why you keep stopping and starting with exercise might be just as important as what you're actually doing when you work out. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth that you've heard me say before. Exercise is not a weight loss tool. I know, some of you are already searching for the stop button because you think I must not know what I'm talking about. But stay with me because this is one of the most liberating things you're going to hear, and it's backed by decades of research in the field of obesity medicine. Exercise is not an effective primary tool for weight loss. Not because it isn't doing anything for you, but because of something fascinating that our bodies do when we start exercising more. Our bodies compensate. When we increase physical activity, our bodies often respond by reducing energy expenditure in other areas. We fidget less, we rest more, we unconsciously move less during the rest of the day. And we burn less fuel going about our daily routine. Researchers call this metabolic compensation, and it's not a character flaw, it's biology. It's your beautifully engineered body doing exactly what it's designed to do: maintain energy balance and protect your survival. There's also the issue of appetite. Exercise, particularly vigorous exercise, can increase hunger hormones. For many people, a hard workout is followed by a meal that more than replaces what was burned. Again, not a personal failure, that's simply normal human physiology. Here's a thought experiment I love to use with my patients. Think of someone you know who exercises faithfully. Maybe they run several mornings a week or are at the gym all the time. Now think about their body. They probably haven't gained weight over the years, right? They may have a healthy, fit physique, but they're not getting thinner and thinner every year until they disappear, right? Even people who exercise daily and vigorously tend to maintain their weight rather than continue losing it indefinitely. That's not a bug, that's a feature of the human body. I've had many clients train for 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, and even marathons without losing a single pound during training. That can feel devastating if you've been told your whole life that exercise equals weight loss. But in my field, this finding is consistent across the research literature. An analysis published in the journal Current Biology by researcher Herman Pontzer and his colleagues studied the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the few remaining hunter-gatherer groups on the earth. And they found that despite dramatically higher daily activity levels than sedentary Westerners, their total daily calorie expenditure, how many calories they burn, is nearly identical. The body simply adjusts. Their research helps shift the scientific understanding of exercise from a calorie-burning engine to something far more nuanced. And here's the kicker from clinical trials. Studies that use exercise alone as a weight loss intervention consistently show modest, often disappointing results. A comprehensive review of exercise-only interventions, no diet, found that exercise produced far less weight loss than dietary changes, and that combining the two was more effective than either alone, with diet doing most of the heavy lifting. So if you've been grinding away on a treadmill wondering why the scale won't budge, as I certainly did for many years, please hear this. You're not doing it wrong. You're simply using the wrong tool for the job. So what is exercise good for? Everything else, it turns out. Here's where the conversation gets exciting, because even though exercise doesn't reliably produce weight loss, its impact on essentially every other aspect of health is profound, well established, and frankly, kind of miraculous. Let's go through the highlights, starting with mental health. The data on exercise and mental health is among the strongest we have in all of behavioral medicine. A massive review, basically a study of studies, found that exercise produces moderate to large improvements in depression across a wide range of populations. And when researchers looked at specific types of movement, walking, jogging, yoga, strength training, the benefits were impressive with all of these activities. In fact, the size of the benefit from exercise for depression was comparable to what we see from psychotherapy and antidepressant medication. I'd like to sit with that for a moment. Exercise, walking, lifting weights, and doing yoga can work as well as medication or therapy for depression. That's extraordinary, and it doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves. The research on anxiety is equally compelling. Multiple large reviews and randomized controlled trials show that exercise produces meaningful, clinically significant reductions in anxiety symptoms, regardless of whether the exercise is low intensity, moderate, or vigorous. Now, I want to be very clear. Exercise should not replace medication or therapy when those interventions are needed or recommended. Full stop. But it absolutely belongs in the same treatment conversation, and it should be something your doctor is discussing with you at every visit. I like to think of it as exercise as medicine. Now, how about stress regulation? Well, exercise also profoundly changes how your nervous system handles stress, not just while you're working out, but for hours and days afterward. Even a single session of 20 to 30 minutes has been shown to lower cortisol levels and reduce blood pressure reactivity to stressors later in the day. In other words, the workout you do in the morning makes your nervous system calmer when your boss emails you about an unexpected deadline at 4 p.m. Regular exercise literally trains your stress response system. It improves communication between the brain and the adrenal glands so that stress hormones get switched off more efficiently. Physically active people still experience stress, of course. Exercise doesn't remove life's challenges, but they tend to recover from stress faster and their stress response is less intense. Here's something important. Short sessions count. Research shows that as little as 10 to 30 minutes is sufficient to improve mood and stress response. You do not need to exercise for an hour to improve your stress level. You don't need to go all out if you don't feel like you can do that. Moderate movement done consistently does the job. Now, let's get to the part that's arguably the most important for those of you who have already done the hard work of losing weight. While exercise is not an effective primary tool for weight loss, it is one of the most powerful tools we have for keeping weight off once it's been lost. The National Weight Control Registry, which has followed thousands of people who have successfully maintained weight loss of 30 pounds or more for at least a year, consistently finds that regular physical activity is one of the strongest predictors of long-term weight loss maintenance. In fact, the vast majority of successful maintainers have high levels of physical activity. You might be wondering, Why does exercise work so well for maintenance when it's so disappointing for initial weight loss? A few reasons. First, when you've lost weight, your resting metabolic rate drops, your body is smaller, so it burns fewer calories at rest. Regular exercise helps offset some of that metabolic slowdown. Second, exercise helps regulate appetite hormones more effectively once the body is at a lower weight. And third, exercise builds and preserves muscle mass, which keeps your metabolism more active over time. One more, fourth, and this is the one I think matters most for the long haul. Exercise creates a feedback loop within your brain that makes healthy choices feel more natural and automatic. It's not just burning calories, it's changing how you think and feel about your body. We've established why exercise matters. Now let's talk about the part that trips up almost everyone. Actually doing it consistently without burning out, losing steam, or quitting after a few weeks. This is where the behavioral science gets really interesting. But before we dive in, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor. Just kidding. It's still me, Dr. Lisa Oldson, physician and founder of the new Weight Loss Strategy Lab. While the Smart Weight Loss Coaching Program essence stays the same, our new name better reflects what we actually do together in the program. Beyond coaching, at the Weight Loss Strategy Lab, we teach, experiment, reflect, and explore the latest science around weight loss, longevity, habit change, and health. I bring all of this to my live weekly strategy sessions on Zoom alongside our signature courses that you can access at your convenience within the program. The biggest shift is in mindset. In the Strategy Lab, we approach weight loss like scientists, not like judges. When you get off track, and we all do, there's no judgment. Instead, we help you dissect what happened, find the learning, and create a better hypothesis for next time. For now, you can still find the Weight Loss Strategy Lab men's and women's programs at our original site, smartweightlosscoaching.com. And we're back. One of the frameworks I find most useful in my clinical work is the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, sometimes called the stages of change. That's probably more familiar. It describes 5 changes. Pre-contemplation, where you're not really thinking about changing. Contemplation, where you know you should but haven't committed. Preparation, where you're making a plan. Action, where you're doing it. And maintenance, where it's become a consistent part of your life. Here's why this model matters. The strategies that work in one stage may actively backfire in another. If someone is in pre-contemplation, meaning they're not actually ready to exercise yet, handing them a rigid training schedule doesn't help at all. What does help is exploring what movement might look and feel like for them, addressing misconceptions, and building curiosity rather than compliance. Pushing yourself or others into action before readiness is one of the most common reasons exercise habits fall apart quickly. The person isn't resistant or lazy, they're just not in the right stage for that approach yet. How we nudge ourselves along through the stages of change is probably a topic for another episode. If you listen to one of our recent episodes, you heard me talk about identity-based habits. James Clear of Atomic Habits argues that lasting change doesn't start with what you want to achieve, but rather it starts with who you believe you are. And this applies profoundly to exercise. If your internal story is, I'm not an exerciser, then every workout will feel like you're fighting yourself. You're not building a habit, you're staging a jailbreak from your own identity over and over again, which is, of course, exhausting. But when you shift the story, when you become someone who moves their body regularly, or someone who's practicing becoming an exerciser, behavior follows identity rather than fighting against it. This is backed by research from psychologist Dr. Hazel Marcus on self-schemas, the mental frameworks we hold about ourselves that determine which behaviors feel natural versus effortful. When exercise doesn't fit your self-schema, it will always feel harder than it needs to. But actually, my friends, motivation isn't the problem you think it is. Here's something I'd like to say directly. If you're waiting to feel motivated to exercise, you might be waiting a long time. I know I usually am. Why? Because motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates with sleep, stress, weather, hormones, work pressure, and 100 other variables. Elite athletes don't rely on motivation. They rely on identity, routine, and environment. Training isn't something they decide to do each morning after consulting their feelings. It's simply what happens. It's what they do. They pre-committed to it and they do it. Self-determination theory, developed by researchers Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, helps explain why some people sustain exercise and others don't. The theory identifies 3 core psychological needs that, when met, foster what they call intrinsic or internal motivation, the kind that's internally driven and much more durable than the "I'll feel really bad about myself if I don't exercise" variety. Those 3 needs are autonomy, feeling like you have a genuine choice in what you do and how you do it, competence, feeling like you're capable and improving, and relatedness, feeling connected to others. When these needs are met, people don't just exercise, they want to exercise. And research shows that this intrinsically motivated, internally motivated exercise sticks dramatically better over time than exercise driven by external pressure, guilt, or weight loss goals. So what does this mean practically? It means choose movement you actually enjoy or at least don't dread. There's no single best exercise for health. The best exercise is the one you'll actually do. Start at a level where you feel competent. Grinding through a workout that makes you feel clumsy or defeated doesn't build the exercise habit, it breaks it. And find or create a social component to exercise, if at all possible. Research on exercise and stress specifically found that exercising with other people amplifies the benefits. Movement plus connection is particularly powerful. You might be wondering how to build an exercise habit from scratch. Let's say you're starting from 0. Maybe you've been sedentary for years. Maybe you've tried and stopped many times. You've been busy, which I completely get. What does the behavioral science say about how to actually make this stick? First, start smaller than you think you should. This is counterintuitive but very well supported. Behavioral research on what's called graded tasks, gradually increasing activity over time, consistently outperforms jumping straight into intense programs. A 10-minute walk 3 times a week is not a failure to do enough. It's a successful beginning. Second, use self-monitoring. People who track their activity, whether with a step counter, a simple journal, or a wearable device, are significantly more likely to maintain their habits. One study I particularly love is a large meta-analysis that found that smartphone apps and activity trackers are associated with roughly 1,850 additional steps per day compared to no tracking. That might sound modest, not quite 2,000 additional steps per day, but each 1,000 step increase in daily activity is associated with a 12% lower risk of death. So that's not a trivial number. Okay, third, to build an exercise habit, the third step is to reduce friction. Research consistently shows that exercise that's moderate in intensity, inexpensive, simple, convenient, and includes a social element is most likely to be maintained long-term. That's why I'm never going to tell you that you need to join an expensive gym or do a complicated program to get results. Convenience beats perfection every time. Fourth, connect exercise to an identity and a reason that isn't weight loss. Let me repeat that because it's important. Research shows that people who frame exercise primarily as a weight loss tool are less likely to stick with it for the long term compared to people who frame it as something that supports their mental health, their stress levels, or their energy. Weight loss is slow, unpredictable, and often invisible for long stretches. Mental clarity from a morning walk, that's immediate. Reduced anxiety after a yoga class is immediate. Those feedback loops matter enormously for habit formation. And fifth, and this is something I've seen make an enormous difference clinically, use motivational interviewing principles on yourself. This means approaching exercise with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of, why can't I just do this? Try, what would make this feel easier or more appealing? Instead of cataloging your failures, explore your ambivalence with genuine interest and curiosity. You're not broken. You're a complex human being navigating a culture that's given you a lot of conflicting messages about what exercise is for. A review of 55 research articles on exercise adherence, or sticking to it, identified 14 key factors that predicted whether people maintain their exercise habits over time. The most important ones, enjoyment, or at least the absence of unpleasant experiences. If exercise feels punishing, the habit won't survive. The second one is integration into daily life. Exercise that fits around your actual life is far more likely to stick than exercise that requires you to reorganize your entire schedule. Also, a sense of ownership and active participation in decision-making. People who choose their own activities and goals maintain them better than people who are prescribed programs. Continued support and connection with others. And this one surprised some of my colleagues, moderate intensity. Not brutal, heroic, super intensity. Moderate intensity is associated with sticking with a new exercise habit over time. Notice that none of the top predictors of long-term exercise maintenance are discipline, willpower, or doing the hardest possible workout. They're enjoyment, convenience, social connection, and a sense of personal choice. This should feel liberating for you. I know it does for me. All right, this was a long one, but it's time to choose your NBA, your next best action for today. I'd like you to think about one thing before we close this episode. Not a new exercise program, not a gym membership, not a training schedule, just one thing. How are you currently framing exercise in your head? Are you framing it as a weight loss tool? Something you should be doing, something you feel guilty about not doing, something tied to the number on the scale? Or are you framing it as something you do because of who you are and who you want to be and how you want to feel? Your MBA today is simply to write down one sentence that represents the identity you want to have around movement. Not a goal, an identity. Something like, I'm someone who moves my body regularly because it helps me manage stress and feel like myself. Or I'm someone who goes for a walk after dinner because it's part of how I take care of my brain. Write it down, put it somewhere you'll see it, and notice how your relationship with exercise begins to shift. Not because you're working harder, but because you've changed the story. You've got this. Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like more support during your smart weight loss journey, check out our group coaching program at smartweightlosscoaching.com. Until next time, stay well and stay smart.